telling you, every time our intro plays, superhero
I
pose
know it's
always. Hello, Internet. We are that Silverline show on Tuesday. I am Jose Fuentes, the slinger of inks, and tonight I am with Ron Fortier, writer extraordinaire. Ron, how you doing?
Hey, I am doing awesome, and I'm really looking forward to tonight's discussion because again, as we were talking before we got on air, I love that topic. All right, as a writer and also a ferocious reader, I get the whole concept of storytelling being part of what we are as a race of beings, and again, telling stories is in our DNA.
Yeah.
We go back all the way to the cavemen, all right, the Neanderthals and whatever, all right. I mean, hanging around with their wives, and they were hunter-gatherers way long before agriculture gets invented. So the idea is they start to try to develop a language. Hey, Dave. Brant, welcome aboard, amigos.
Gentlemen.
Sorry to interrupt, Ron.
Our theme tonight is creating, modern myths, and we've been doing that since mankind came on the scene. I was just talking about how the fact that Neanderthal hunters would go out on a hunt, and if they were lucky enough to catch, early, bisons or mastodons, and carve them up and bring the meat back to the tribe, they had this innate desire to tell that story. So sure enough, you grab, earth pigments and whatever, and you get inside the cave and you start making, crude graphic stories on the cave. Well, you can't tell a story without having a protagonist. And from that simple elementary addition, story, hero, comes the hero myth, comes mythology. I can remember in high school, our English teacher basically opening up, all our eyes on pre-history, pre-recorded history with the story of Beowulf, right? One of the first ever recorded stories of a hero, a mythological hero who goes after this, phenomenal monster called Grendel and whatever. And we only have that story because it was handed down through the generation by oral tradition, telling the stories before language became sophisticated enough to have written languages. It's almost impossible to look at American comics today and not see the threads of these kinds of heroes, of that kind of tradition. Like I was telling Jose before we went online, the idea is you can go back to the 1930s in the pulps and see the characters created there, the heroes created during the Great Depression by the various pulp writers and artists. And they were drawing upon Greek mythology, all right, Roman mythology, all of this to create their own versions of mythic heroes. So out of the gate comes perhaps the supreme physical perfection human being, Doc Savage, the man of bronze, all right? And basically, his name is Clark Savage Jr., right? He's the perfection. He's called the man of bronze, like I said, and his secret hideaway is in the, Arctic, the Fortress of Solitude. Yeah, okay. Nobody's going to tell me that Siegel and Schuster weren't mining the pulps, okay? Then you turn around and you've got Gil Kane and Bill Finger, all right, who themselves were weaned on pulp characters like Zorro, the Shadow, to name a few, all right, the Masked Avenger, the Dark Avenger, who operates out of the, the limits of the law to bring justice, to the villains that the law can't touch. Again, people always go back and swipe from the past. think of King Arthur and, the Knights of the Round Table. Exceptional heroes, each and every one of them, all right? Coming together to form a group to defend the poor and the homeless and the helpless. Well, if that isn't, a British version of the Justice League, I don't know what is. So we're in good ground, guys. I mean, Achilles, Hercules, the list could go on and on. The story of the Trojan, the Greek Trojan War is rife with heroes and conflicts that ultimately over the years get, turned around and tweaked and changed to whatever the culture we have today. So, hey, my 2 cents, guys. I'm kicking it off. Feel free to jump in.
All right. In case you guys didn't catch all that. The theme for tonight is how comics created the modern mythology. And Ron, that was a really good start off because I remember growing up and I was so much into like Greek mythology. You know what I mean? I truly was. Like Greek and Roman mythology, just the idea that, when the Romans came, we're gonna rename all your Greek heroes so that, to incorporate them in so that we can, you can better be assimilated into our empire, right? And I don't know what it was, but just the idea of Hercules and his deeds and, just all the mythology. And it influenced me in, wanting to create heroes and characters of my own. Like I have a personal OC or original character I've made named Friction, and his entire stick is channeling lightning, and that was absolutely fed from Greek mythology, with Zeus, Roman counterpart, was Jupiter. But yeah, like I obviously my own little twist on it, but on how his powers work. But he was I was obsessed with like I said with Greek mythology. That's where he came from. That's where my original character, like the idea of his powers, and trying to on his end is righting wrongs because he got wronged. The stories obviously evolved from there, but like the basis was based off of like I knew it when I made him. You know what I mean? Like he was based off of Zeus. So
yeah, I mean, you got to give Stan Lee and Kirby credit. I mean, they had no problems at all when creating, the Silver Age Marvel comics in the early '60s, with just tapping into all of that, okay, and basically giving us Thor. All right, there he is, right out of Norse mythology, and all that baggage that came with him, right? I mean, Odin, his father, and Loki, the trickster brother, right? I mean, I'm reading those comics and going, hey, I know this stuff. I read this stuff in school. Okay, I read all this stuff in school. So then, a few years later, they incorporate Hercules, who shows up in the Avengers, all right? So they had no problems at all mining actual mythology. But the truth of the matter is that's what they were creating. They were using the original classics as their templates for the new characters that they were creating and putting out there. And I mean, it works all the time. Go back to, thinking about the comic book characters we have, and I was talking about the pulp characters, Daredevil, all right? Daredevil is this blind lawyer with a unique, ability with his senses, okay, to fight crime. Well, there was a character in the pulp magazines called the Bat, who was a lawyer who lost his sight, got it back through some bizarre operation, but posed as a blind lawyer. The kicker was it wasn't so much his heightened senses as the operation that regained his sight gave him the ability to see ultraviolet so he could see in the dark. And that's what he kept hidden from the bad guys when he became the Bat. I mean, basically the greatest tool in the world. He could sneak up on them in their hideout, shut off all the lights. They're totally blinded, and he can see like it was noontime. And he was a classic pulp character. But again, the mythological thing just continues to echo. Wherever you find something, that appeals to you, somehow or other you hang on to it, you keep it, and then you filter it. I was years ago listening to old time radio programs from the 30s, and and heard this one radio program, and now this is based on like Eastern mythology, okay, with all the mystical.
It's so mystical it froze the screen.
Didn't want Ron talking about it.
Huh.
All right. Do we know where Ron was going with that?
No.
Okay.
I want to hear the end of the sentence.
Right? I do too. But I'm going to take a guess and guess it was the shadow. Because wasn't the shadow, didn't that involve in some Tibetan mysticism and whatnot?
Saw the movie. I can't remember. Is it bad? Does that make me a bad person that I only know secondhand about the pulps? Or maybe third hand?
Well, I will tell you, growing up, I didn't understand pulps. I didn't know that was the thing, to be honest with you. But I definitely enjoyed and appreciated it. And I'm going to change our screen because, man, do I look huge in the way we have it set up right now. Let's see if I can. There we go. I like that better.
Yeah.
I'm all right in my face. But, I actually had a few of was it the I think it was the Shadow, the Phantom. I think it was the Phantom radio digesting things on a cassette, and I think it was one side had a couple of the radio shows, and the other side was Abbott and Costello. I'm not quite sure where it even came from. I honestly my mom probably picked it up at like a Goodwill or something. You know what I mean? Because she knew I liked to listen to stuff when I was sleeping, and it wasn't. But I used to listen to the Abbott and Costello over and over again, and when I knew it so well, and it was the show they did, Who's On First. You know what I mean? So, absolutely loved it. I still quote that to this day with the kids, not just Who's On First, but like several of the different little skits that were on that cassette. But yeah, I would listen. I think it was the Phantom. I'm pretty sure it was the Phantom, because I used to flip it over in the middle of the night and play it and fall asleep. But that, to me, the idea, and you probably would know, and like this makes more sense to you, Brent. But the idea that those modern myths at the time, right, the pulps and whatnot, influence how we create our, the characters we want to create. Like even regardless of whether it's a superhero character or if it's a empowered agent of some sort or whatever the character may be, I think we're all influenced by those, and I'd like to think that Silverline characters are going to help influence other like future people, generations. You know what I mean? Like, oh man, I remember Demon's Tale. Like, I want to make a character like Demon's Tale. I want to make a character like Champion. I want to make a character like Cat and Mouse. You know what I mean? And obviously, we're all influenced by everything that we do in the, from everything that we've read, everything that we've watched. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I love Westerns. I used to watch Westerns as a kid. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm obviously going to be influenced by that when I create, Western story. My Western story I created, Dark Redemption. You know what I mean? That was influenced by a lot of the Western movies and TV shows I used to watch as a kid. And like I said, trying to create our own stories compounded on the stories that we've read and we've done in the past, that we've read in the past, you know what I mean, that we've been a part of. And yeah, that's, that when it comes to thinking about modern mythology, that's where my brain, my thought process goes. I feel it's there's maybe more to it than that. You know what I mean? From a writer's point of view.
Well, what's funny? I mean, it's a funny question because modern mythology is almost a contradiction in terms. I mean, when we think about like myths, we're thinking about stories that have been around for hundreds of years, which means that when they were first written, they weren't myths. They were just stories.
Right.
And you needed the weight of decades and then even centuries before people considered them myths. So when we're talking, like when I'm thinking of a modern myth, what I'm thinking about is something like, especially when it relates to comics, and you think of all the classics, and I'm not going to go all the way to the pulps because Ron can really inform that more than me. But when I think about like a doomed planet that's only survivor crash lands on Earth and becomes a superhero with middle class values. I mean, I didn't say it very well, but basically that has the ring of a myth, or a kid whose parents are shot in front of him, who wants to revenge himself upon the entire criminal element of the city. I mean, there's something about that just rings really like a myth. It's
Right.
something that you can say pretty fast. A kid who gets power and wants to be famous until his uncle gets shot because he made a mistake and has to live with that forever. I mean, I know Bendis did in Ultimate Spider-Man 5 issues surrounding that one story, but I mean, Stan Lee did it in 15 pages. And I'm never going to knock Bendis for that because he really could capture the drama. But the fact is that, in my mind, is what a modern myth is. It's something that's a story that's very basic at its core. And that's why when you think about Superman as a modern myth, you're not necessarily thinking about the stories. The one time where he lost his powers, or the one time where he had to fight Brainiac again, or something like that. What you're really thinking about is Superman, the guy who has a lot of power and wants to help people, and yet is an alien. And what is that like? You know what I mean? So Batman, I mean, so many stories have been written about Batman, but at his essence, it's not about whatever crime he's stopping or whatever weird criminal element he's dealing with this month. It's about the fact that he is just a man who suffered a terrible tragedy that defined his world, and which gets crazier by the minute, but he in a way gets crazier too. And so there's an element of myth there. And then when you think which is, I mean, so in answer to your question, long-winded answer to your question, I feel like Kalis might start to wander into that realm, because I can say that the story is about an astronaut who made a mistake, went to another planet and made a mistake and wants to go back and fix it. But even then, I can't really describe it in terms that seem terribly mythological.
Okay.
So if someone in 50 years is still reading Kalis, I will not be alive to see it, and maybe that's good, because I really don't expect that to happen. But if they do, and they were able to tease out this very basic story element, then I would say, okay, well then maybe it has the potential to be a modern myth. I don't know.
Ron.
Hey guys.
Welcome back.
The internet gremlins got us.
Right. Okay.
Blew a fuse.
What?
Blew a fuse in the house.
Back to what you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Attacked by Grendel. What can I say?
Right.
I mean, I'm picking up on the end of what Brant just said here. And, one of the things that I always think about with this particular discussion, all right, because again, like I said, I have no issues with looking at today's comic book heroes, all right. I mean, Wonder Woman, for heaven's sakes, all right, is an Amazonian, all right? I mean, we keep lifting from myth all the time. So you have to ask yourself, never mind 50 years in the future, how, if, you know, will they be remembered maybe 200 years from now, 300 years from now? If, you know, I mean, if comics aren't around, will those stories still echo? Will people living on other planets remember, well, gee, on the planet Earth, all those years ago were these great heroes, Superman, Batman, you know, and Silver Surfer and all this good stuff. And will time have basically weakened that little link as to what was real and what wasn't? And will these characters become myth? You know, again, there's a likelihood, easily, if mankind survives and lives for another million years or whatever. I would like to think that some of these stories, in whatever shape they're retold, will still be around, and that would be really fascinating. Right? Absolutely.
Yeah, my question to Brent was, more of a statement. I hope that, you know, my wish is that you know, Silverline characters would be considered, you know what I mean, when people, you know, kids in the future and whatnot, people in the future are creating they want to create their characters and their stories, you know, like, just like we were like, oh man, we got Batman, I want a character that's kind of like Batman, only blah 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 blah, right? I want a character that's like Superman. Like, those are the books that I grew up reading. Those are the characters like I really want to focus, you know, on making my character kind of like that. Are they going to pick Silverline characters to do that? Like, that's, I think that as creators, it's kind of our goal, is to, you know what I mean, like, maybe not a forefront goal, but like maybe something, you know, in the back of our head that we'd love to have, you know, future generations be like, dude, I remember when Ron wrote, you know, this character and this story, like, I want to, you know, I want to create a character like, you know, that follows that same theme. Like, basically, you know, comics are perpetuating comics because they're being inspired by the comics before, you know, the ones, you know, before our time, before, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, look, let me talk to that, because I think one of the things that I'm experiencing now, all right, and that's only because, you know, I'm this old duffer, okay?
I was going to say legend, but
yeah. Oh, but never say that around my wife. I'll get slapped in the head. That's her cue. Whenever anybody ever uses the word legend around me, I get one of these. Boom. Okay, right. It's her job to say bullshit. So, but the thing is that I now go to conventions, like I was in Denver, you know, 2 weekends ago, and I've got these fans coming up who have, like, somehow or other.
Oh,
not another fuse.
Grendel, leave Ron alone. Oh man, right when he starts getting to the good parts. No. That's okay. Ron, we'll catch you back up when you defeat Grendel yet again. But yeah, I'm not quite sure where to go on what Ron was saying. Like I said, I like the idea that, you know what I mean, that we are self-perpetuating, like, as creators. You know what I mean? We are creating kids and people who are interested in what we're doing, and, you know what I mean, they want to do the same thing. And I know Ron, it's like living to be like another 1,000 years and whatnot. Like, not at the rate we're going, but
well, you know what's funny too? We genuinely, I mean, we have to consider the times in which we live too. I mean, the Greeks and the Romans and, you know, early European civilization. I mean, they did a lot of painting,
Yeah.
And people kind of dug that, and they didn't have their own books, they didn't have access to mass media of any kind, and so now when I'm like, I wonder if people will like comics 10 years from now, instead of like, I wonder if they'd like comics 100 years from now or 500 years from now. Who knows what it's going to be like? I mean, even back when Superman first came out, I mean, kids bought comics for what, a dime, and it was either that or penny candy or going to the movies. I mean, they didn't have a lot of things to spend their money on. Things have changed a little bit. Media has changed. Now everything has changed as far as media is concerned.
Right.
Not only can everyone consume it, but now everyone can create it. I mean, they carry movie studios in their pocket, in their phone. They can use AI. I mean, now they don't even need artists to draw. If they don't know how to draw, they just get AI to do it. It's amazing. I mean, except it's all terrible, and you should never do that. But
Right.
If you gotta. The point being, who knows what it's going to be? The landscape is constantly changing. So in a weird way, as a writer, I'm actually I'm almost like, I cannot create a modern myth. What I can do best is write what I think is a good story. And if I'm lucky, it will get some traction with people and maybe inspire people. And if that happens, maybe they'll go on to make their own thing with some themes that I have used. And maybe that's how a modern myth would be created. But I mean, when the myths, when we think, the classic myths of Hercules, right, like you were mentioning, I mean, that was hundreds of years ago in a society that basically was so much different from what we have now. You're almost thinking to yourself, if we even had the ability to talk to them, would we have anything in common to talk about? So I don't know, maybe. But I don't know where I was going with that. I guess in a weird way, I want to give myself a break, frankly. I'm like, does my story suck because it doesn't necessarily fit in with the tropes and the format of ancient myth? The answer is probably not. But hey, I mean, I'm writing it because I think it's fun, and I think other people would think it's fun, and
right,
maybe it'll inspire people. I'm not banking on it, but maybe it will. That'd be awesome. And who knows, I guess this is what I'm getting at. Myths aren't created except over time, right, and over generations. So I don't know.
And that's a perfect point, because even, we know the trials and whatnot of Hercules, but we know them because stories were told, right? Like, obviously, the oral storytelling, telling stories which travel from town to town to town, and people like, oh, did you hear the story of blah blah blah? Did you hear the story of blah blah blah? Like, and then I feel over time they also, exacerbate. They got exaggerated, as all things do. But I think the idea is, to me anyway, the comic books allow us that sense that, that parallels oral storytelling to really do create said myths. Mm-hmm. And that I know you say you want a break and whatnot, but like I kind of think it's so. I guess let me interject and say on myself and say, before I went to art school, I used to draw on everything. You know what I mean? Like, I had big old pieces of cardboard at work, drew on it, and my boss would yell at me and tell me stop doing it, until he stopped yelling at me. It was like, hey, what are you drawing today? You know what I mean? But
that's cool.
It's something we can't stop. Like, you know what I mean? I don't think we can ever, when that you're a creative, you can't ever stop being a creative. If it's something that, unless something detrimental, comes in and it just stops you. You know what I mean? In which I had that growing up. Like, I think it was junior high, somebody told me my artwork sucked and I should never do it again, and I didn't. I stopped drawing until probably after high school. Like I do little doodles here and there, but like I took that to heart. And then look at me now. Like, not that I'm anybody famous, not that I'm, legendary, but but I can't stop. I'm constantly like I'm working on something all the time. Like, at least I try to. You know what I mean? This is what I've decided I want to do. I want to be a creative. I want to tell stories with my artwork. I want people to look at my work and be not necessarily riveted, but like inspired by it. And the oral stories of like Hercules and the gods and whatnot, that inspired more stories, that created those myths. And you know what I mean? I like the idea that, maybe, like I said, what I do is doing that as well. Like I said, I kind of feel like it's almost, if you are a creative, it's your kind of our obligation to continue that storytelling, because, you had said, oh man, Ron is crazy. But it's kind of our obligation to do so, to create these stories, to create these legends that continue on. You know what I mean? And because if you think about it, like you said, like there are stories of like of the we keep coming back to Roman and Greek Empire and whatnot, but there's stories of wars, stories of conquering, stories of the hero coming out of those environments. And even in 50s and the 40s and whatnot, we had stories that came out and further back, stories that came out, for World War I, World War II, like legendary stories that came out. Like I can tell you at least 2 to 3 different stories off the top of my head of of Sergeant Rock and his characters, you know what I mean? Like his crew, like the Haunted Tank, because that's, you know what I mean? Those stories influence me enough that I can recite them to people, like for the most part, you know what I mean? And that I want, and I wish that happens with our stories as well. You know what I mean? That we can speak on it, that, and talk about our stories and show people our stories. And then they read it. It's like, oh dude, I read this story about this book called Kalis, and it's like this dude that fell from the sky and blah, 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 blah. Right. So there is a lot, I think, that not necessarily in a formal obligation, but like, if you're, like I said, if you're a creative, I mean, don't lose that. Don't just push that aside. Like it's it's an innate responsibility.
What's interesting is, I think you're onto something, because as creatives, when you really are wanting to make something of some worth, and worth is judged really, in the eye of the beholder. It's hard to actually say, but when you think about, this is a good question to ask, is think of when you think about your childhood and you were thinking about these war comics and stuff, and how you can recite them. What's a worthy question is, why did it stay with you so long? And I would assume it would be because of a feeling it captured, an emotional response. There are lots of really interesting stories out there. They're very intricately plotted. They have really cool endings. But when you really think about the things that have serious staying power, it's something in a story that captures an emotion that makes you feel sad at the end, or victorious, scared, all of these things. If a story doesn't move you, odds are it's not going to stay in your consciousness for
right.
So, and when you think, I mean, so many of these of the older myths seem to be centered around some kind of problem that either gets fixed and everyone's happy, or not fixed and it's tragic. So tragedy. So when I think of the stories I write, and Kalis is probably as good as an example of any. In each issue, usually, I mean, I have an overarching plot. It may be too dense, frankly. I think I'm pretty open to that criticism. But with each issue, I'm typically trying to give my main character, Scott, some kind of problem that if he fixes it, he's happy and he can move on, and hopefully the audience will be happy with him, or he'll whiff it and bad things will happen, tragedies will happen, and he'll be sad, and that will lead him to what's going to happen next and a new problem he'll have. And who knows how well I'm able to capture it, but the thing I'm almost guarding against is throwing a lot of information into the story,
Right.
because information is cool, but this is my biggest. I'll always use this. Man of Steel, the movie, I didn't like it, and the main reason was because I didn't feel anything when I was done with it. It was a very interesting movie. It was cool to see Krypton, and it was, there was some fun sci-fi in there, and it was interesting to see all these different things, but that was the best I could say. It was interesting. I don't want to write interesting stories. I want to write moving stories.
Right.
And I don't mean moving as in like somebody has to die or there's a huge tragic thing. But if I can move someone even just a little, they will remember what I wrote. And if I don't, I mean, there's so much noise out there. They'll forget it in an hour. So that's almost like a goal I just try to keep in front of me.
Right. I think that's a good goal. You know what I mean? I think we all should strive for that at least a little bit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Dave, how you doing, buddy?
Doing okay. I'm a little tired.
Yeah, Dave loves modern myth stories, by the way.
I do?
Yes, sir.
We could see
I wouldn't have started going back and reading some of the Grendel stories, not the same Grendel Ron was talking about, but the Grendel stories, had we not talked about it, I wouldn't have gone online and looked for the Mage comics. And I think that those definitely follow under the modern mythology theme.
Yeah, definitely. There is a lot in there. A couple of things that I wanted to talk about were the use of that mythology for creating the personas that are used in more modern protagonists and all that. Not explaining it that well, but an example would be thinking about Moon Knight.
Okay.
And the play on that, where they're bringing in the mythology of Khonshu and the Egyptian gods, and how that plays into a modern character, but it's still playing off the mythology that was and established Egyptian mythologies out there. And the thing that I find kind of interesting about that character in Tract is that as you go along, Mark Spector is becomes kind of a mythic character type, just in the way, in the way that he exists. Yes, he's based down. He's a soldier and this is when the tired comes in. But he has a lot of the modern techniques to fighting, and all that stuff. But then you bring in a lot of the mythology and the things that just are old school just the the stuff that I said I'm not
No,
explaining very
it's
well.
all right. So, I see.
But he's creating, based off of that. Yes, he's just a person, but he's also portraying a persona of the Moon Knight.
Right.
That's built off of that, and it kind of follows a bit too with some of the stuff with. The second example was with Billy Batson in the Shazam, where they're being powered by the gods, and where a lot of that stuff comes. So I kind of like a lot of the idea where you have things that are defined in realms that are modern characters that are takes off of old classic mythology, and seeing those things for me create a very interesting character. And I do like to see some characters that may be very grounded in this is modern day and blah blah blah, and kind of think back to the Han Solo comment of wizards and well, so and so won't replace a good blaster in your hand type thing. But then as the story migrates, he actually starts to see and change his tone. And I think bringing in characters that you can develop that have a particular mythology that's maybe outside of their understanding, and their migration towards it and becoming a true successor of that mythology, I think can create some very interesting characters and some very interesting stories.
Right. I can definitely see that. And like you said, Han Solo definitely spun his belief. Maybe not full 180 to, you know what I mean? But I mean, even towards the end, you heard him like, hey, may the force be with you. He may not have fully understood or believed what that meant, but he understood that even just the line, even just saying that you believe or you remotely believe, you know what I mean, that incited confidence, you know what I mean, in like, hey, like I hear you, you know what I mean. And like you said, Moon Knight become, that character becoming, come to terms, like, I mean, it's a mix of the old and the new, you know what I mean, the old belief, you know what I mean, the old gods and whatnot. Like I think a really nice take on that is Neil Gaiman's American Gods, because that definitely incorporated like a lot of the older gods, you know what I mean, and then it kind of created newer gods. And it's according, and I read the book, like not necessarily the comic, right, or the TV show. I don't think I maybe saw like one episode of the TV show, but I had read the book about it, and it was interesting because society, like the growth of society from from ancient times to, you know what I mean, Victorian, the Dark Ages, Renaissance, onto modern age and whatnot, cyber age, it created not necessarily the necessity for, but created new entities, new gods that were stepping into a role. You know what I mean? I for the life of me, I can't remember the characters or names in them, but it basically created more modern gods, like technology, like electricity. You know what I mean? Like television. You know what I mean? That ended up developing a persona themselves. You know what I mean? A manifestation themselves. So like the older history, you know what I mean, they were kind of picking the main character Shadow as like in Avatar-esque to, to kind of figure out why they're dying off. You know what I mean? And it's interesting because they mentioned, I think they mentioned Loki, they mentioned like the Greek gods, Indian buffalo, the thunderbird, you know what I mean, the great bison. They really like kind of, that book really kind of bridged across a lot of like the, a lot of like the mythos of like deities and stuff like that, or whatever the belief was. I don't think Indians necessarily believed in deity, but as much as they even though now in the modern age Native Americans can speak of the creator, you know what I mean, and but like creating it, I mean, we're building on piggybacking on the stories of the past, you know what I mean, and maybe Neil Gaiman had a point, you know what I mean, like we keep creating these newer gods to to kind of push the old ones out, newer vices, newer focuses, you know what I mean, and in comics we kind of do the same thing, you know what I mean, we're creating more modern mythos, like every year is a new set of characters, and then we always 2 steps forward, you know what I mean, 1 step back, you know what I mean. It's like, oh, we're gonna reinvent this character and you know what I mean, we're gonna take a new take on this character. It's like, dude, literally your new take took like 10 years ago. So not quite.
Yeah.
But like the new take that like pops off top of my head, right off the top of my head, is the idea that they were like, oh, Batman, Bruce Wayne, Batman, Bruce Wayne, Batman, Bruce Wayne. You know what I mean? And Bruce Wayne puts the cowl on, and he's Batman for the evening. the psychological or whatever belief that, well, maybe it's not that. Maybe Batman is the main primary personality, and Bruce Wayne is the mask. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why, and that was a few years ago. You know what I mean? That storyline came out, but like that was kind of a revelation to me. Like, oh. Yeah, that actually makes sense, kind of like and then that delves into like psychological stuff, because like that just means that he never really processed the death of his parents like most people would have, you know what I mean. So the billionaire playboy, that's just the mask I wear so everyone thinks I'm just aloof, or just thinks that I'm, you know what I mean, I'm just a conceited narcissist. And but like the truth of the matter is, like, I'm always brooding, I'm always working things out and stuff. I think that's a build on modern mythology,
and it also incorporates the thinking of the times. I think that's probably where we're going to have to wait a long time to see what actually floats to the surface as stories that could become myths.
Well, Tim will still be here for that. Tim's a vampire, I'm fairly certain.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one of these days he should pack up his stuff better so he can get on the show, man. But
I was gonna tell everyone online that he was being held hostage.
Yeah. I mean, what's funny is, but you think about a story like the psychological makeup of a superhero in the 30s and 40s. Probably not, because people were more, I mean, there was a lot of bad stuff going on. The war was going on. They needed distraction. They needed fast stories. They needed simplicity. There's a reason why, stories like, what is it called? Heroes in Crisis, something like that. I mean, there was a DC series that Tom King did a few years ago, where it was just basically about the psychological makeup of all the DC heroes. Yeah. And a lot of people were like, I don't know if I like this, but it actually went over pretty well. But you got to think, it was a story that was timely. I mean, there's so much more focus on mental health right now. And not only that, but we're looking at our modern myths, and we want them to be more recognizable to us. Right. And as a result, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to throw on a costume and go fight crime if you suddenly realize you have powers, unless you can explain it in a way that resonates with people. So that's why, we're starting to see a lot more of the psychological bent in our stories. and stories that need to have some kind of grounding. And so I guess all of that is to say that modern myths kind of, I mean, stories start out as being a product of the times in which they're told.
Right.
But if the story somehow has an element that can transcend the time in which it's told, that's when you start thinking maybe you have like a myth on your hands, I think. So, I mean, who knows what the guy who came up with Hercules was thinking? I mean, he probably also came up with a story called Flavius, the talking fish that liked to swim in the air or something like that.
Right. But
nobody heard about it because it just didn't resonate with people.
Yeah, say people didn't like it as much.
Yeah,
I thought
it was Flavius. Yeah.
And I just recently resaw the movie, you know what I mean? But I saw the movie Hercules with The Rock, right? And I thought that was a pretty nice take on some things. Like obviously, you know, The Rock's beating up everybody because he's The Rock. But the idea, like they kept coming back and saying, oh, like he's fought the Hydra, he's fighting, you know what I mean? And he's fighting, like there are centaurs on the other army of this bad guy and whatnot. And so that they show like this army of like centaurs, like coming over the crest, right? You know, with the sunset behind them. And so like you're seeing them like almost as a silhouette, and they straight up look like a centaur. And then the camera kind of pans to the side and you realize it's just a guy standing on the stirrups or whatever of the saddle, and as it pans to the side, the horse's head appears, and like, oh, that's interesting. Or when they say, oh yeah, I defeated and I took the heads of the Hydra, right? And the story, the myth that he fought a Hydra in the swamp, like according to this movie, it basically pans out like, oh yeah, I took the heads of the Hydra, and he opens his bag and pulls, like the king pulls the head out. And it's a human head with like a lizard helmet hat mask over it, like saying that he took the heads of the bandits that were like killing people and blah blah blah. Like, I just thought that was a really nice take on like, oh, so that just shows that stories like, you know, evolved in it out of. I mean, it could have been like that. It could have been, oh yeah, he took out the Hydra, but the Hydra was, you know, organization of bandits that, you know, and he went and defeated them, you know what I mean? And I like the idea that because he's supposed to be his nephew running around with him telling the great stories of Hercules. So when at the beginning, when his nephew's like being like about to be killed by bandits, he's like, oh, like you never heard about like Hercules fighting the Nemean lion and like blah blah, like the taking on the Hydra, like fighting it with his bare hands, like that, like just like exaggerating like immensely the story of Hercules. And obviously that, I mean, not I say obviously, but I mean maybe it wasn't, maybe it was like straight up, dude, I told you exactly how it is, you know what I mean? I told you exactly how I saw it, exactly how John saw the messages, you know what I mean, in Revelation. Who knows?
Yeah.
But what if, right?
Yeah. What and if that movie was told with a very clear idea of myths are basically overblown stories.
Right.
And the basic story is just as interesting. So that was an interesting take on that.
I thought so too. I really like that take, as opposed to like Herculean movies, you know, where you see where he's legitimately fighting a Hydra, legitimately fighting a lion, you know, a giant lion whose skin can't be broken.
Right. I remember it's so funny because I never thought any of these movies are really memorable, but that's okay. Like, remember Clash of the Titans, the one that came out a few years ago?
I love Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, it had the Hydra in it also, and whatever his name was. But the whole idea of that story wasn't that these stories are overblown. The angle it was taking was these deities should be protecting us, and they're not.
Right.
It's time for the humans to step up, you know, which is a very modern sensibility in terms of, or more like point of view in terms of story, especially when it deals with supernatural and especially religion. So, again, it's a product of its times, which is funny because we're talking about like David, you were talking about Moon Knight. I mean, the funny thing about Moon Knight is if you think about Mark Spector, but he was basically a mercenary, right?
Yep.
Who is wounded, falls in front of what was a statue of Khonshu, and becomes the Moon Knight. I mean, if you think about it, if he had been anyone else, it wouldn't have been that good of a story. I mean, what if he was an accountant, or what if he was a really religious Khonshuite? I don't know what religion contract that. Yeah, but it's like he would have been a believer. But a more compelling story is to take a guy who is as far away from being religious as you can imagine, who suddenly is given power by a god. So you have, when you think about some of the best characters, they have this duality in them that's really a lot of what makes them so compelling. So again, that helps to develop this sense of the mythic, because the best stories are usually about, I mean, the ones that are compelling have some angle that doesn't make sense,
right?
That it's in a story. So, yeah.
Except for Han Solo. Han Solo makes all the sense in every story.
But Han Solo is a good example. I mean, think about what would have happened if he had never crossed paths with Luke and Obi-Wan. He would have just, him and Chewie would have been smugglers forever. They would have just kept doing their thing, and they would be trying to get money, and who knows if they ever would have fixed it with Jabba or not.
They'd be like Ed, and Eddie.
Right. And then they meet these two guys who force him out of his comfortable life of being a smuggler into being a hero. And he actually finds he's kind of good at it. Now you have a duality, because you have a rogue who actually finds that he's on course towards honor. That's a duality that makes Han Solo so interesting. So, I don't know. If you can capture that, I think you're onto something in terms of really building that kind of story that has the potential to go towards full-on myth.
I think those paradoxes help. You know what I mean? Yeah, like you said, the lovable rogue, the rogue who is forced on a path of honor. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Character for typically dark character forced onto a path of nobility, or a path of righteousness. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's been done, but I mean, always, like, you could just any character. You know what I mean? There's almost any character we can probably pull that same theme, that same particular hero's journey out of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, I know ones I like. So
if you think about any good character, they all have that sense of duality. Batman is Bruce Wayne, the fop, the playboy, the guy who doesn't care about anything except loose women. And then you've got him putting on his costume, and he's totally the opposite.
Right.
Superman is this practically all-powerful character. Who does he choose as a foil? A nerd who basically just stumbles all over himself, and no one can recognize him because he's just such a doofus.
Dude, was it chameleon glasses? Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly. You have Spider-Man, who's a teenage kid, and yet he puts on his costume and he's the funniest guy around. Yep. How does that even work? Except that
nerdy scientist. Yep.
Yeah. So.
All righty. Excuse me. Well, we're coming close to the end. Any final words on creating modern mythologies, gentlemen? I think we covered some pretty good stuff.
I don't know if we answered anything, but
of course not. Of course not.
Did we? Well, I don't think we did, but did we do our housekeeping stuff?
Oh, we sure didn't. You're fine. All right, we have 7 days and are over half. Let me share this. Share screen. This guy.
By the way, while you're queuing that up, I remember seeing this thing, and you were talking about the glasses and things. And it had the different this and here's Clark and Superman with that glasses disguise, and then there's this one parody that shows He-Man and Prince Adam. It's like, how did that even fly?
I did like the more modern version of He-Man, not the He-Man Revelations that was on Netflix, but like the one before that, where it actually showed Prince Adam's like a younger kid, and when he became He-Man, it's very much like Captain Marvel. All right. There we go. There is our current crowdfunder we got going on, guys. That I probably should have mentioned at the beginning, but Dave wasn't here to remind me about housekeeping. It's your fault, Dave. It's your fault.
Well, it's always my fault.
Right. Here we go. Sirens 1 through 3 and Scary Book 1 through 2. Sirens is pretty cool story. New Orleans, voodoos, zombies, vampires, and the like. And I actually like it. I've read the whole thing. I haven't, but yeah, I've read the whole thing. It's interesting. And then Scary Book is like, I believe it's our, at least it is with the first one, our playful take on like the old EC comics, you know what I mean? A little playful story and whatnot. Yeah. But yes. And then right here, see? So description: investment broker Jeff Delmer's life changes forever when he stumbles onto Lois Neville in a rainstorm during Mardi Gras. She just disappears after a whirlwind romance, and Jeff discovers Lois is actually Lou Garou. He is slowly turning into a zombie. He has to find Lois and break the spell, and chaos and shenanigans ensue. And I like the final end of the story. That I like it. It's interesting. It's a cool story. And then Scary Book, when the ruler of Hades notices that hell is turning into a not so bad place, he discovers demons are being summoned to Earth because of a spell book that has been released to the public, and now just anybody is summoning demons. With the demons gone, there is no one to torture souls. So Lucifer sends Crimson back to Earth to fetch the book from with the aid of an unwitting bookstore owner, Marty Applegate. That is our two stories. We got some pretty sweet covers for them for Sirens. Cover A over here is the foil cover, and it's a bit risque, a bit little burlesque there, Roland. And then we have Ron Fortier's cover over here with a little panther. Let's see if I can. Ooh, look at that. I'm fancy.
Ron, you said Ron? You mean
yeah,
Rob?
Ron. Rob. Sorry, Rob. I meant Rob.
Just clarifying. Rob Davis.
Yeah, Rob Davis.
Ron
Sorry.
Dude.
And then there's cover A and B for a scary story. And then there's the foil cover. They look sweet. I'm so happy. Like I just went back and was going through some of my books, and I saw I was Obsoletes #2 foil, and we have gone miles and beyond. Like that was a great cover. I love it, and I'm biased because it's my cover. But yeah,
well,
like,
that was one of the things I got biased too.
Right,
when I did when I colored the two covers for Achilles' Landed book 2, I had to go and I got a couple of comps of the regular cover, but I had to go out and get the foil cover. It was biased. I mean,
right.
I colored it, and I had to have the foil cover. So foil covers really take it to the next level. So it's definitely something to check out.
Scrolling past these real quick, where they are. Look at that. And Aaron Humphreys' original art for Sirens 2. Ooh, and right on. Somebody already got Rob's cover. That's awesome. That was a good cover too. And then there is John Drury's cover, still available. The original art for it still available, which is pretty awesome. And then posters, and you can also get any Silverline books that you have missed that we all have worked on, and we all recommend you doing that because we love the books. We love the modern mythologies we are creating. See how I brought that back around? All right, everybody.
Yeah, it's your chance to pick up,
That's
back
right.
issues of
That's right. Back issues of Kalis, back issues of Obsolete, back issues of everything that Dave's colored. You colored quite a bit of covers, dude.
No, not a few. Most of my stuff's been in Demon's Tales.
Oh, that's right.
And,
I get to see a lot of back scenes of like the covers and stuff that and Demon's Tales stuff that Dave is colored. So I'm biased. All right, we a little over, but we are that Silverline show on Tuesday. Catch our other streams on
Wednesday,
Wednesday,
Wham.
right? Wednesday Wham at 9:00, and they are going to talk about why do we need superheroes, right? I now have the calendar, guys. I can now see what we got coming up next, right? Then
Silver Sunday.
Catch our Silver Sunday at 8:00 Eastern, and these are Eastern Standard Times. Silver Sunday at 8:00, and they're talking about how to set a scene. And next week for us, next Tuesday on the calendar, it says Turkey Day and comic book trivia. So we are going to have a fun day or a funny thing. Yes, next Tuesday. It's what it says. Turkey Day and comic book trivia. I am in trouble because every time Roland hops on here, I lose. So, alrighty. So, catch all our streams. Click on wherever you're watching us, your likes and notifications and whatnot. Follow us on our social medias. And until next time, make mine
Silverline.
Hey everyone, this is Jose Marzan Jr., inker for Marvel and DC, and make mine Silverline.